My name is Noah Abji, and today we are going to learn how to write equations given situations. So whenever we write equations given situations, we always use things called variables. Now you may already know what a variable is, but in case you don't, I'm going to explain it now. So a variable is a symbol that's used to represent a number, and we see variables all the time. So let me give you an example of when we would use a variable and exactly what they are. So let's say that you're shopping. Then the items in your shopping cart can be represented by the variable C. Most of the time when we use variables, they're just letters that represent a number. So we could say C equals 10. And that would mean that the cost of the items in your shopping cart was $10. If C was 80, then that means that the cost of the items in your shopping cart would be $80. And here's how we can use it in certain situations. So let's say if you only bought a $20 sweater, that's the only thing in your shopping cart. Because it costs $20 and C is our variable used to represent the cost, then C would be equal to 20 because it costs $20 total and C is that cost. Another example is if you bought a $20 sweater, but you also bought a $100 pair of boots, then C would be 120. Because remember, if C represents the cost, and your total cost is 20 plus 100, which is $120, then C would be equal to $120. Your cost is 120. Now we can also have variables of different types. They don't just have to be cost. They can be a certain quantity. So let's say you're buying a certain amount of pieces of paper, and X represents how many pieces of paper you're buying. Then we can use this variable X. We could also call it Y or Z or T, and it's very situational. But we use letters most of the time as variables to represent certain numbers. And in these two examples, C represented the cost of the items in our shopping carts. So now that we know what variables are, let's talk about how we use them when representing situations at the most basic level. So let's propose a hypothetical scenario that you're going to the movies, and a ticket to the movies costs $10 per each person. Now you're going to go with some friends, but you don't know how many friends you're going to go with. So you can't say for certain whether it's going to cost $20 if you're going with two people total, or $50 if you're going with five people total, or any other amounts of dollars. But you want to write an equation to represent how much it's going to cost based on how many people are coming. Now, we don't know how many people are coming, so we don't know a number for that. So this is a case where we would use a variable. Let's call P the amount of people who are coming. So P represents people. And I'll write that out. P represents the amount of people who are coming. Now, if P is equal to 2, then our cost is equal to $20 total, because you do $10 per two people, which is $20. Let's say P was equal to 7. 7 people are going. Then our cost is $70 because it's $10 per each person, and with 7 people, that's $70. And if P is 150, say 150 people are going, which seems quite unlikely, but could happen, then our cost would be $1,500. Now we want to write an equation to represent this. We have some data points, but we want to use P in an equation to represent how much it's going to cost if you didn't know what P was equal to. Because right now you don't know how many friends you're going to bring to the movie. So here's how we do that. If P is our amount of people and it's $10 per person, then $10 times the amount of people, or 10 times P, is going to be equal to the total cost, which we'll call C. C is going to be our cost, just like last time, to go to the movies. So 10 times P equals C. And when using variables, when multiplying, we can actually just write 10P. So 10P, 10 times the amount of people who are going, is going to be the cost of what it costs to go to the movies. All right, let's do another example, but phrased like a question this time. Samuel is buying pastries at a bake sale. He spends $60 buying muffins and croissants. one muffin costs $4 and one croissant costs $2. So write an equation to represent how many muffins and croissants Samuel buys with $60. Okay, so here's the thing about this question. We have cost in this question, which means he can't have bought unlimited muffins and he can't have bought unlimited croissants. In total, the cost of the muffins and the cost of the croissants are going to total to $60, but we don't know exactly how many muffins and croissants he bought. So we're going to write an equation to represent that based off each other, because let's say he bought 10 muffins, then he has to have bought 10 croissants, because 10 muffins would cost $40 because it's $4 per muffin, and 10 croissants would cost $20. So that would total $60. Now, if he bought, let's say he bought 15 muffins. He bought 15 muffins. That would cost $60 total, which means he would have to have bought $0 in croissants, and that would also be $60 total. So the amount of muffins and croissants he buys are based off each other. They're related in some type of way. So we're going to write the equation to represent that. And the first thing that we should do is for all numbers that we don't know the value for, such as the amount of muffins he buys and the amount of croissants he buys, we should create a variable for it. So let's call M the amount of muffins that Samuel buy. Okay, so muffins. And C is going to represent the amount of croissants he buys. The amount of croissants he buys. So we have M and C to represent muffins and croissants. Now, in a previous question, C represented the cost, but we labeled in this question that C is representing the croissants that he buys. So that's how we know C is croissants and not cost. So since it costs $4 per one muffin, as it says right here in the question, then $4 times the amount of muffins that Samuel buys, so 4 times the amount of muffins, should be equal to the cost of the muffins. Cost of the muffins. And because a croissant costs $2, then $2 per each croissant, or 2 times the amount of croissants that he buys, is going to be equal to the cost of the croissants total. Cost of the croissants. And when we add the cost of the muffins and the croissants together, that's going to equal 60 because they spent $60. So the cost of the muffins is 4 times M, or 4M. So the cost of the muffins is 4M. And the cost of the croissants is 2 times C, or 2C. So now if we add 4M, the cost of the muffins, plus the cost of the croissants, which is 2C, that's going to be equal to the total amount of money he spends, which is $60. So 4M plus 2C equals 60. And this is our equation to represent this situation. All right, so now I have a review question. If you'd like to try it, I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video before I explain how to find the answer. Okay, so the correct answer to this question, or the correct equation to represent the situation, was M equals 0.05N plus 0.1D plus 0.25Q. So let's read the question so this makes a little bit more sense. Annika has some coins in her pocket. She only has nickels, dimes, and quarters. Write an equation to represent how much money Annika has in coins if M represents how much money she has in dollars. Use N to represent nickels, D to represent dimes, and Q to represent quarters. So in this question, it already gives us our variables for us. M is the amount of money she has. So that's what we're trying to find with the equation. The amount of money that Annika has. Money that Annika has. Now, N is the amount of nickels. So that's the number of nickels she has in her pocket. D represents the amount of dimes she has in her pocket, so dimes. And Q represents the amount of quarters she has in her pockets, so quarters. And together, when you add the cost of all these coins, that totals to the total amount of money that she has. Now, when we're writing our equation, since we're trying to find the amount of money she has, we're going to say M equals something, right? Because it's the amount of money she has, total in dollars, equals something based off how many coins she has. Now, here's how we use our knowledge. It doesn't give us any numbers in this question, but what we do know is a nickel costs 5 cents. 5 cents. A dime costs 10 cents, or is worth 10 cents, and a quarter is worth 25 cents. Now, one thing it does say in the question is M represents how much money she has in dollars, not in cents. So we want to represent not in cents, but how much in dollars each of these coins is worth. So since there's 100 cents in a dollar, and a nickel is 5 cents, a nickel is $0.05. A dime is $0.1, or I'll write a 0 at the end because that's where the 10 cents comes from. And a quarter is a quarter dollar, which is $0.25, or 25 cents. So now that we have those measurements, we can start writing our equation with these variables to represent the total amount of money she has. So starting with nickels, it costs $0.05 per nickel, or that's how much money she has for each nickel she has. So $0.05 per nickel, and N is the amount of nickels we have, then we should multiply $0.05 by the amount of nickels we have to get the total amount of money from nickels. So this is money from nickels. Next, since a dime costs $0.1, we multiply 0.1 by the amount of dimes we have to figure out how many dollars we have in dimes. So 0.1 times D, which is how many dimes we have, will represent the amount of money from, this is a money symbol, money from dimes. And then we can do the same thing with quarters. Since it costs $0.25, or a quarter is worth $0.25, if we multiply that by the amount of quarters that we have, so 0.25 times Q, then that will give us the amount of money from quarters. Money from quarters. And now that we have the amount of money from nickels, the amount of money from dimes, and the total amount of money from quarters, and those are the only coins Annika has in her pocket, if we just add those together, like we've done in this equation below, then that will get us the total amount of money she has. So that will be equal to M, which remember is the amount of money she has in dollars. And just like that, we've written our equation to represent how much money Annika has in dollars, based off how many nickels, dimes, and quarters she has in her pockets. That's all, and thank you for watching.